Okay, so that little bit of polish, we were kind of cleaning up a few loose ends about we should always see something in the view comics. I have at least one comic saved in this account, right? Because I logged in with a brand new account. This is a different account. If I log out and log back in with the other user, I should see their comics. So we polished up about there's always going to be something there, either a message or comics. Okay, to make this work, what I was getting at was if you run the app the first time and there's no comics, this button doesn't exist. And when you even have comics and you run the app, it doesn't exist until after the code processes in JavaScript. So to create an event listener to listen for clicking that icon, we cannot do it exactly the same way as before in terms of we first created a variable. Remember all of this? We created a variable for an object that existed at runtime. These HTML nodes exist at the moment that the code processes, that our app starts. So we were able to create a variable based on this HTML thing that exists at the moment the app starts. And then we created the event listener. Once you click that logout button, log us out, run a function. Okay. Well, the difference here is that these icons don't exist at runtime exactly. So we're not going to create objects for them, but we can create event listeners for them. So we're going to start to set up here. This will be a special one. We'll say event listener for a dynamically generated button. Dynamically generated button. The other ones are not dynamic. They're written in the HTML. They exist at runtime. That one about the prep comic, the icon happens after prep comic. It doesn't happen. It doesn't exist at runtime. So what does exist is the div show table. That does exist at the moment that the app loads up. There is that div there. We can click on it and run a function which we will call function show comics info. I want to run a function. When I click on that little speech bubble, I want to run a function that will show all of the info of a particular comic. Okay, at the moment, this code, however, is too much. This is technically saying anywhere that we click on the table, run the function. Anywhere, including the first row, or the title, or the name of the comic, or wherever. We want to be able to only click on the icon. So we're going to have one more parameter here. We're going to say, when we click on this table, but specifically a part of the table, after this comma of click, we have quotes, comma, we have pound, we have dot btn show comics info. That is the class we added to that cell. The icon has a class, btn show comics info. Here we're saying, when you click on this table, but specifically anywhere that has that class, then run the function. So here we're setting ourselves up to target only where those cells are, where those icons are. So we have an extra parameter here to be more specific. Something, basically something inside of something. When we click run a function. So event listener for a dynamically generated function. Let's say AKA a class inside of a table. Because this is representing the table. This is the class because it's got a dot. Make sure that's a dot. Pound sign, of course, is for an ID. But we set it up that every one of those icons has a class. Dot is a class. Now also, we need to do something really fancy in that we've embedded in each row, we've embedded a unique ID. Okay, well, I want to click a certain button in a certain table to run a certain function and also pass into it a certain ID. So we have to use the syntax that we've used up here. We're going to submit a certain form and pass into it a certain data to do something with the data, prevent default. So we have to use the syntax like this. We have to have an anonymous function to capture something to pass it into the function. If we don't need to pass any data like we did up here, we just say, click the logout button, do it. Click the delete collection, do it. We didn't have to pass anything into it, so we don't have to specify parentheses and parameter. Here we do. We want to pass the ID of this row, basically, into here. So we will write the function, open parentheses, open curly braces, and however you can manage this with all of your skills, that needs to go inside of the curly braces. Parentheses. So we have function, open close parentheses, open curly brace, the function with its parentheses, end of curly brace, end of parentheses. That's why I wrote it out that way first and then moved it. Because sometimes if you write it longhand, you might lose track of it. So just be careful. This is exactly how mine looks. After the comma of this parameter, we've got a function, anonymous function, opening and closing parentheses, opening and closing curly braces. The name of the function we're about to create plus the parentheses so that I could put the ID into it. Okay, so the idea is that, don't write this yet, but the idea is data-id. That's the point of this. So that I can capture the information inside of data ID, pass it into this function so that this function knows which row I clicked on. Every row has a unique ID. So I want to pass the ID into the function. That's why I need this anonymous function to pass data into it. Okay, that's not the complete code. We need to write some jQuery here to be able to read that attribute. We're going to write the dollar selector, parentheses. We're going to write the jQuery selector right here. Okay, so that's going to search for something. It's going to specify something, which will be this. This is this thing that we clicked on. This object that we clicked on. What I'm saying here is click on the icon and pass an object into it, pass data into it of what did I click on. This is dynamic. It changes literally on what you clicked on. This is that. This is what you clicked on. I clicked on, in my case, I clicked on that icon, that cell, so it's going to pass all of the data related to that cell. But I don't need that cell because the ID attribute is attached to the row. The ID is attached to row, not to the class. So we need one more thing here. Dot parent, parentheses. All right, so I'm saying once you click the icon, run a function, and the data we're putting into the function is starting from the current thing that you selected, the icon, kind of go back to the parent, which is the whole row. So right there, we're passing the whole row into the function. The row, as we see here, is where the data ID is at. So a parent, it's something inside of something. There's a cell inside of a row, inside of a table, inside of the section, inside of the HTML. There's parent and child relationships. So the parent of the thing I clicked on, this thing that I clicked on, the parent of this thing that I clicked on is the row. So this row is going to get passed into this function. Let's define that function. And just kind of see inside of the console to see how it's working. Let's back up where we've got our function definitions. And we'll create a new function. Function show comics info. At the end of my functions right here, function to display details of a comic. So function fn show comics info, parentheses, curly braces, and fn show comics info, console log, this function is running. So over here, I'm saying I'm about to run a function with data. Our function definition is missing then the data, because here we're saying let's pass data into this function. So this needs a parameter, whatever we want to define it, we'll call this comic. This comic in question. This object that we've specified is being passed into this function, however we want to call it, this comic. So in the console log, let's just output that just for curiosity to see what it looks like, which will also help us understand what we're dealing with. So here we should be able to save it and run it. Go to View Comics. You should have at least one comic saved. When I go to View Comics, you want to click on the speech bubble icon. It should run this function. It should say the message. And right below it in the console, it'll give you a bunch of stuff. It'll give you all the definition of that whole row, because we're saying, let's capture the data of the parent of the thing you clicked on, which is the whole row. There is a cell inside of a row. Give me the parent, the whole row, one level above what I clicked on. I've got a cell in a row. So in the console, I should see an object representing the whole row. Go ahead and save it and run it. Let me check mine. I'll go directly to View Comics. I'll click the bubble. Show Comics is running. I have a particular row. You can open that up. I've got one row in there. You can open that up, you'll see a bunch of stuff, such as somewhere over here, child nodes. I have stuff in that row. What else is useful? Right here, inner HTML. Inside of that parent, we've got a cell with another cell with a class with an icon. The actual text inside of that is just only that, that, and that. This has an ID, data ID of that. There's the underscore ID of that object. So the in your console.
Yeah, I mean, what's the data ID? I see data set.
Yeah, just look around through there. It's going to be somewhere in there. You know, as long as you see some of that, you're fine. If you don't see exactly, I'm kind of browsing it, but it should be in there. View comics. Click the icon, and then when you F12, you should see. Just open that thing up right there. It's going to be in there somewhere. Just explore it. It's going to be in there somewhere. It's just a bunch of properties of a cell, of a row.
Can you go back to the code?
So we've got two places. One is down there on the event listener, and then the function's pretty simple so far. Let's do one more thing here. Console log. The underscore ID of this row is so this comic is an object that represents the whole row. Over here we've said pass the whole row into this function. Inside of the function we can refer to that by the shorthand this comic. When I'm in the web browser and I go to F12 and I see all of that stuff in there, there's a bunch of properties. There's something on the left and a colon, something on the right. All of those are properties. So if I then say this comic, and I want to display one of the properties, I have data dash ID. So we can say dot data and quotes ID. This row has an attribute data dash ID. We're saying the ID of this row is that whole row. Give me the data dash ID of that. If that particular row, if that object had data dash role, here I could write role. You know, give me the role. This comic dot data dash role. Give me the role. And it would display, you know, section or button or dialogue or whatever valid roles are. If I'm trying to read or write transition, right? We have when we have a button, we might have data dash transition equals something. Well, if I want to read it in JavaScript, I'm specifying the data method to read or write. Read what's in the data, which data, data dash what. The what is in quotes here. And so here I'm about to say the ID of this row is this.data ID, and it'll display, it should display what is in your ID. Yes? On what line? That would be a good idea, yes. Thank you.
Is that just, is that not redundant, or are we being taken to a new page that's going to have the info, and that's why we're listing the title and that information again?
We're going to be taken to a new little pop-up screen.
Oh, okay.
Right now, this View Comics is going to be simple, that it only displays the title and the year of the comic, the title and the number. I want to display the year, the publisher, the photo, the barcode. All of that's not going to fit. So we're setting ourselves up here that this will display a pop-up. But we've got to set ourselves up to first know which of the comics we clicked on, so that then it knows, based on that ID, to display all the info of that comic that we clicked on. Let's save it and run it and test it. Let's make sure you've got a few comics saved. Click on those speech bubbles. Check in your console. We haven't done anything on screen yet, but check in your console. We have these messages. Great, but better yet this. The ID of the comic that you clicked on is this. It should tell you the ID embedded. I already moved it here, but up there. It should tell you the ID embedded in the code in the console, which will then lead us to, eventually, db.get. And it'll get the particular ID and show all of the fields, and we process the fields of that one comic. Let me just run mine, and I'll get back to my code in one moment. Let me confirm. I'm going to log back into that other account where I had 15 comics. I've only got one at the moment, so let me log out. Which one did I do here? V. I had a bunch of comics here. Okay, so when I open up console, I'm going to clear my console just to see the latest output. I'll click on comic 99, click here. The ID of this comic is 9991999. So 999 from 1999, issue 9. That was the ID embedded. If I click on Wonder Man number 1, it says the ID of that particular one is Wonder Man with spaces removed, 1992. I don't see it here yet, but again, internally it knows that number 1. If I select, Amazing Man 99, same thing. It's showing me the ID embedded in the HTML, 198899. So every time I click, it dynamically shows me the ID of a different row. All of that is happening in two places because first in the event listener, I'm specifying wherever you click on something with a class of this, but specifically in this table, run this function, and into the function pass the whole row. In the actual function then, I say, show me the data-ID of this row. This row is, now we're calling it this comic, because we call it this row. If we call it this row, we can write this row. But all of this longhand is this shorthand here, data-ID. Every time I click, I run it again and again, and every time I click, it dynamically shows me a different thing. So if it works up to this point, I think it might be a good stopping point at this point, because we've done a lot. We've started to retrieve the comics. We've got to confirm that at least we show the basic table. We'll refine it as we go on. And then now we click on individual comic, and we get something for each individual comic in the comics here. If you want to test it again, we'll delete everything and start over. Remember our checks over here. No more database, no comics. So that kicks in about now there's no comics. Refresh the table, there's no comics. I save another comic here. Ironheart number 1, 2017, Marvel. And I've got a comic. All of the comics that previously existed. I click on that, and now I'm seeing the comic I just saved. That's leading toward, like, okay, great, it shows up in the console. I want it to make a little pop-up. And I want that pop-up to display everything. Title, year, publisher, notes, barcode, etc. And within that pop-up, I want delete comic, just this comic. Or I want edit comic, just this comic. So we're building ourselves up that here, it knows which comic I mean out of my 20. Once it knows that, then I can specify, okay, let's edit entry in the database, IRONHERT 201171, which is unique from IRONMAN 19631. Everything has a unique entry in the database. We are identifying that we've programmed it so that that icon knows which one we clicked on. Well, it doesn't know anything. We programmed it, but the logic of it is all of this we've done. So let's end here. I'll put my code into the folder. We'll do a little lab time just in case that it works. In case it doesn't work, when we come back, we'll keep refining this so it does something on screen. Question?
Instead of putting in ID, could we put in the variable temp comic, because that actually does include everything, the title number, your publisher, and
Temp comic. I think temp comic is existing in a different function, and therefore we might not be able to access a variable from a different function unless we somehow also keep track of it globally.
if we move that variable up into our variables database, would that do that, or?
Maybe, but we might have to rewrite our code a little bit also,
Okay.
because temp comic.
Could you cut and paste that, call it temp comic 2, and then put that down in the bottom?
Yes, but then we have to keep track of one thing is called temp1 and one is called temp2. We need to keep those synced, or else one is going to become Spider-Man, one's going to become Wonder Woman, so then they're not synced. Because we have two variables. They don't match. They don't match the same memory location. So we will polish this when we go on, but that's good thinking there about like how can we further put this together and logically or what makes sense, but you're on the right track.